Caesarea is one of the most fascinating sites in Israel, both because of its historical story, amazing antiquity, and also because of its connection to the New Testament and a few of the fascinating stories that happened here in this place. In order to understand Caesarea, we have to get to know the person that initiated the construction of it in the first place, King Herod the Great. Herod is a famous character. He is the one that built some of the most important sites in Israel, the final form of the Second Temple, Masada, and also the entire city of Caesarea. The story of how Herod became the king of the whole region is fascinating in itself. When the Romans take over this land at 64 BC from the Hasmoneans, they don't just come and take over it, they are invited to come and take over the country by the two brothers of the former queen, Shlom Tzion. When she dies, she doesn't manage to get an agreement between the two brothers who will be the future king of the country, and that's how the two brothers, Aristobulus and Hyrcanus, starts fighting one another in order to take the position. Both of them are feeling that the only way in which they can win that battle is to go to Pompeius, the Roman general that at the time sits in Syria of today, and ask for his help. Pompeius comes over, takes over the region, and he gives some positions to the two brothers, but with time he starts taking that power away and he moves it to another guy called Antipater the Edomite. The Edomites are a fascinating story. They are Jews, but they are the only case in Jewish history when someone was forced to become Jewish. Judaism as a religion never tried to promote itself, to convert people, but when the Hasmonean kingdom takes over regions where the Edomites were living, they are giving them two options, either to become Jews or to leave and go somewhere else. So the Edomites were Jews, kosher Jews, but at the same time they were more of people of the world, very much involved with the Romans from even before they came here, and they were more involved in world politics than the small Jewish communities that were sitting up in Jerusalem on the Judean mountains. Antipater slowly makes his way to be the most powerful ruler of the kingdom, and he understands the potential of Roman politics. So from a young age he grows his son Herod to understand how the game works and to learn how to be the future king one day. When Antipater is being poisoned to death by some of his political rivals, Herod is going to Rome. He creates very strong connection with some of the elite families in Rome itself, and the Romans send him back to be the king of Judea under Roman rule. Herod starts by crushing a rebellion in the Galilee that started already against his father and then it was against him, and immediately starts to play the political game as well as it can be. He creates very good connections. He gives gifts, or you can say today bribery, to the strongest families in Rome, and they, in their turn, pull the right strings to manage to allow Herod to take almost all the tax money that he collected directly to his pocket. And Herod becomes extremely wealthy. And with all of that money, he starts building amazing structures. The final form of the Second Temple was one of the most impressive sites built anywhere in the Roman Empire. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world, and people from all over the Roman Empire came here especially to witness it. So what is the story with Caesarea? How come Herod decides to build a city out of nothing? Until Herod came here, there was only a small fisherman village here called Migdal Straton, or Straton Tower. Herod, as I imagine it, was passing around this region, looked over to the ocean, and he saw something incredible. Countless ships that were sailing north and south, especially to bring wheat from Egypt to Rome itself. Egypt was a great barn of the Roman Empire, and the shipping line was at the time passing near the shore. The ships of those days didn't just cross the sea in a straight line, even though today some wrecks were found that are changing this thought. Most of the ships were sailing within sight of a shore. So if you would be standing here 2,000 years ago, you could see all these ships moving back and forth, bringing all that wheat all the way to Rome. The ships of those days couldn't sail the Mediterranean during the winter storms. The waves were too high, it was too risky, and that's the reason that for 3-4 months out of the year, all of those ships would go within closed ports and spend the winter there.
We also have a testimony for it in the book of Acts. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the fast. So Paul the Apostle warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also." But the centurion, instead of listening to Paul, said, following the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship, since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on.
Here, in this region, in the land of Israel, there aren't very good ports. The few ports that existed even before in Jaffa, in Akko, in Haifa were very, very small. The reason for it has to do with sand. The Nile River in Egypt used to bring enormous amounts of sand into the Mediterranean, and the current would take all that sand to the east and north and throws it on our shores. And that's why even if you would say, I want to make an artificial port, to excavate some sand out, to make a deeper water port, it would very, very quickly be jammed with all of that sand. If you go into the Israeli shores in Tel Aviv or Haifa or wherever, you walk and you walk and you walk into the water and the water gets to your knees. And you walk and you walk and you walk some more and it gets to your pelvis. The water are very, very shallow, and this surrounding is very difficult to a deep water port. What Herod did here is one of the most incredible construction projects of the Roman times. He decided to build here the largest artificial port the world had ever seen. And he started bringing enormous amounts of volcanic ashes from the Vesuvius mountain in Italy, mix it in the right formation to create cement, so they would fill all that dirt within wooden boxes, float them to the right place, and then sink them one on top of the other. That material would harden when it would meet the water and create concrete cubes. And on top of it, an enormous breakwater was built. Once a breakwater was built and some sand was taken out of it, it created a very large deep water port that could facilitate 10th of those shipping boats that would come here during the winter time to pass the winter in the safety of the port itself. So now you had all the boats and the sailors here. Those sailors need maybe hotels or a place to stay, which is not the boat itself. They need restaurants, they need to be fed, they need entertainment, so you build a theater and you build a hippodrome for horse racing for them. You build storage places for all the goods that those ships are moving. You build roads that are coming in and out of the port in different directions. And that's how, from a small fisherman village, Herod is building here an industrial powerhouse of commerce, of trade. And with time, the Romans are moving the municipality center, the control center of the region, here to Caesarea. So when we're looking at the land of Israel during the Roman times, during Herod times and afterwards, Jerusalem was a center of spirituality, of worship and so on, but the actual management of the country, of commerce, of business, of money, was all happening here in Caesarea, in a bit of a similar way to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in our days. Caesarea got its name, Caesarea Maritima, Caesarea by the sea, as an honorable name for Caesar Augustus, which Herod wanted to impress and show him his loyalty. And the first thing that sailors saw when they came into the port of Caesarea was a very impressive temple that was built on the hill right in front of the port, dedicated to Augustus Caesar. It is there in that location where later on a church was built, after which it was destroyed and a mosque was built instead of it. And then when the Crusaders came over, another church was built. So Caesarea became one of the most important cities in the region from the time of King Herod and until the Mamluk destruction at around 1260. For more than 1,200 years, Caesarea was a bustling, flourishing city, the center of commerce, the center of business. And as such, some of the most important events in the history of this land took place here in this city. The Great Revolt, for example, the one that at the end of it the temple was destroyed, started in a protest that came out of control, so to say, here in Caesarea. And then at the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt, when Rabbi Akiva is captured by the Romans, he's being imprisoned here in Caesarea and eventually executed. It is written that his flesh was brushed with metal brushes. But the most important event that happened in the history of Caesarea has to do with the formation of Christianity in the early days after Jesus' crucifixion. During the time of Jesus, the community of followers were only Jews. Jesus was seen as a Jewish leader for the Jews. He also gives a few comments that are pointing that out. And that's why after the crucifixion, the followers, the apostles, are not intending to make it into something which is outside of the boundaries of the Jewish world. Until Peter is having a dream. It takes place in the city of Jaffa, in which Peter is seeing a white piece of cloth coming down from the heavens, and on it all sorts of foods which are not kosher. Peter, as an observant Jew, is not touching that food, but then he hears a voice telling him, "Peter, you shall not deny what I have allowed." He opens his eyes, trying to understand what the message of that dream was, and then he sees a messenger coming and telling him that Cornelius, a commander in the Roman army, is asking him to come and visit him in the city of Caesarea. That is the moment when it clicks in for Peter. He understands the meaning of it. He's taking the journey from Jaffa to Caesarea. He goes to Cornelius and he's joining Cornelius, all of his family and all of the servants in their house into the community which would become later the Christian community. In other words, here in Caesarea, the first non-Jews were accepted into the community of the followers of Jesus. This is a place where symbolically the community spread out from the boundaries of the Jewish world to the entire world. Another event that happened here in Caesarea is the imprisonment of St. Paul, of Paulus. Paulus went to the temple in Jerusalem and he got a non-Jew into the boundaries of the temple itself. And he was held here in Caesarea as a prisoner for 2 years. A few years ago, a complex of cells was excavated under the palace of Herod, which is where I am now. And that may be the cell where Paulus was held for 2 years when he was here in Caesarea. What we see here is a replica of a very interesting finding that was found here. We are within the complex of the palace of King Herod, and naturally after Herod's time, every ruler of Judea wanted to live here because this was the nicest palace in the region, right on the sea with beautiful mosaics. And one of the people that lived here was Pontius Pilate himself. We know it because he left us this writing saying, "Me, Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea, built here a temple for the emperor Tiberius." This is of course not the original. The original is too precious to be left outside. And here in Caesarea, everything almost is built of sandstone, which is not very durable. So the original one is in the Israel Museum and you can go and see it there. So we have here a wave of hello from one of the key characters of the New Testament. The Bible comes to life. Well, this is one of those examples. This area behind me is where the port of Caesarea was. This is where the breakwater of Herod was built. This is where all those dozens of ships would come in to spend the winter here, to bring their cargo into the port. This was the center of Caesarea. But we can't see the breakwater anymore. And the reason is that it's still here, only underneath the waves. Just about 100 years after it was built, it started to sink in the relatively soft sand that is here. And that's how it became an underwater breakwater, which led to many ships not seeing the parts of the breakwater underneath the water and hitting it. And that's why there were many shipwrecks that were found here in this area. A few years ago, a treasure of gold coins from the early Muslim period was found. And every year after the winter storms, divers are going in there to search if the strong waves of the storm were moving the sand over other shipwrecks that weren't found yet. So this whole area is where the ships during the time of Herod would come into the shore, and you can imagine how they would see the temple right over the 4 arches over there, an impressive building. initially a temple for Augustus, then a church, then a mosque, and a church again. This was always the place where the center of the worship in Caesarea took place. This is the ancient theater of Caesarea. The seats themselves were remade to enable shows today. Every summer there is a stage with all the speakers and everything that is being built, and it's still active. Originally there was another set of seating after the two groups that still exist. There was a third one as well. This is the water aqueduct towards Caesarea. It was built after Herod time, and actually there are three water systems here. One from the early Roman period, one from the late Roman period, and one that was built on top of the two lower ones from the Byzantine era. So these were bringing water from springs in a higher elevation than the elevation of the houses of Caesarea, and that's how they had running water, they had fountains, and everything was enabled thanks to that. Today they're of course not active anymore, parts of it were destroyed, and that's the end of the aqueduct. Thank you for watching this video. Please share your thoughts below in the comment, and do subscribe for my channel for more videos. Thank you and have a beautiful day.